Hello everyone, welcome to the Day 9 Daily number 13, again. This is the third time I've started this because it just keeps crashing, and that's not good. That's obviously bad, I obviously don't want that, but such is my devotion to my casting, I will make sure that it doesn't crash this time. I'm not sure why it just keeps going haywire, but unfortunately, for any of you watching on demand, we're not going to have any sort of sexy intro to this. I'll just be saying that we'll be watching Light vs. Movie on El Nino. And I am going to go ahead and turn off the chat, go over to the main screen where we can start watching this fancy-dancy game. And look at this. Perfect. Let me scroll down just a touch. So, yes, unfortunately I will be turning off chat, but don't worry, because apparently one of you has my Skype. And, hopefully that'll be good enough. So, alright, I gotta kind of motor mouth it here, unfortunately, because it's currently 7:32 and matches are on at 8 p.m. So, I don't want to let anyone down, but I also don't want to prevent anyone from watching the stream. So again, sorry about that technical difficulty. I think what happens is my Firefox, because I leave it open 24 hours a day, it probably develops a memory leak. Same thing with my Procaster, probably has a memory leak there as well. And the stream naturally will get clogged up a little bit like that. And really any blip causes it to freak out. Oh, wow. Well, don't add me on Skype during the cast, guys. And I'm watching my cast right now, and things seem to be doing okay. So I'm actually just going to keep double checking this, make sure nothing too bad happens. And honestly, if it's not stabilizing, I'll go ahead and redo this. But let's go ahead and just stop talking about my technical difficulties and focus on the awesomeness that is StarCraft. So, the things I want to focus on in this Ultra Ninja Fast session are the fact that there's this outside ring of expansions on El Nino, which makes nice, safe passageways for dropships, and also allows Terrans to do harassment and continue expanding, because that's always the biggest danger when you do harassment, is that it takes away money from the strength of your push, and hence the strength of you being able to defend your expansion. So for instance on Python, I don't like dropship harassing that much if, say, we're at opposite sides of the map, because what would naturally end up happening is that we can't defend anything on Python. We really need that big push to defend our expansions. So right now, we see the usual sort of scouting going on, and normally, Protosses just go straight for the first Dragoon, but more recently, Protoss players have been getting more aggressive and building a Zealot before that first Dragoon comes out. In general, anytime you see a Zealot at the Protoss player's ramp, you should definitely think Dark Templar or Reaver, because the Protoss player was trying to save gas in order to get them as quickly as possible. So in order to trick the Terran opponent into thinking you're being aggressive, you research air right here, and of course the idea is it looks like you're researching range, and then you wait a little bit, and then you cancel it, which is what we saw. That's why that spinning stopped on the cybernetics core. And our whole goal here is to trick our opponent into thinking that we are in fact being very aggressive early. When we see down here, I don't know if I skipped past that, but we do see down here that Movie is in fact going for Dark Templar. So the natural response, if you think he's going Reaver or Dark Templar, is to get an engineering bay, but we do see an academy going here. It's really important that if your opponent is not going Dark Templar, you have some sort of plan that also relies on this in the future. Because here's the thing, it's very easy to think to yourself, what is the solution now? So for instance, in Terran vs. Protoss, the Terran player might think to him, or excuse me, the Protoss player might say, I'm worried about harassment, let me get a forge and build cannons right now. But let's say you make the forge and you build cannons and no attack ever comes. Have you wasted that money on a forge? You want it to be more like, well, I'm going to get a forge and start researching +1, and if he does end up harassing, then cool, I have this cannon here to defend. And if he doesn't, great, because I had this long-term game plan that had this forge as part of it. So for instance, with the Academy here, we would want Terran to do something like say, hey, if you come attack me with Dark Templars, I have the scan ready so I can hold it off. But if you don't go Dark Templar, I'm going to scan you at a key period in my build. A period where I need to know exactly what you're doing to allow me to either power really hard or attack you really, really aggressively. And it's and that's the sort of decision-making you want to make sure is there whenever you're getting the Academy, because it's really bad to just get the Academy naively thinking, oh, I will hold off Dark Templar now. And what ends up happening is that later on, you end up not needing it. Or actually, early on, you end up not needing it, and later on, you pay for that. You end up getting punished. And also, look at this great placement. Look how much repairing space is on the other side of these. If there's a lot of aggression going on here early, some players have crappy wall-off. Some players will start building the first supply depot there, the next supply depot there, and then a barracks right down there. And this supply depot will have less space to get repaired. This is really, really nice positioning. Plus, it forces the Dragoons to have to walk really awkwardly backwards down this ramp and then back up around. So yeah, so Dark Templars. Never, ever, ever get Dark Templars if you are just hoping your opponent doesn't have detection. That is the worst thing in the known universe. That is a quick, easy way to lose, because you don't want to have a build that's based on hope. You want to make sure that there's some transition that relies on Templar tech, such as going for Arbiters quickly thereafter, or just doing something like delaying his expansion. The most common strong... stable is the word I want to use. A stable use of Dark Templar is to delay this expansion. So just briefly here, note how Scan's going to help out with this. As opposed to the Dark Templar getting here, seeing a turret, and backing up, the Dark Templar gets all the way up here and then has to wander all the way back down. And of course, he ends up dying. But generally, if you just have a Dark Templar, you can just hang out here for a little bit, and Terran has a real difficult time pushing down. So we note that Light does have this command center already constructed down here, but it's just got an add-on with ComSat and hasn't expanded yet. That's because if your opponent does go Dark Templar, it's a little bit more difficult to expand, because Protoss will have a lot of strong units. I mean, even though Dark Templar die easily, they do a lot of damage. So you really do need 3, sometimes 4 tanks, you know, if like your opponent 2-gated, before you start moving down your ramp. So in the meantime, you just get the add-on, get some extra scans, figure out exactly what your opponent is doing. And in a sense, what your thought process should be is, I'm getting my scan now because I can't get money from my expansion. But I will make up for that by using this extra quick scanner to scan his base and then be able to make a really good decision that saves me money. So it balances out in the end. Hope that makes sense. Definitely ask me again in the Q&A if any sort of horrific lag. Sorry, let me try it again. Go ahead and ask me about that in the Q&A if it didn't end up making sense there. I brought up the lag again, just a Freudian slip. I keep glancing over at the screen. I actually have my stream loaded up on my other monitor, and I'm periodically glancing to the left to make sure if anything's lagging. And while I thought, is it lagging? I just said it spontaneously. Now notice what Movie's doing. He's going Dark Templar, and he's getting the Robotics Bay, because naturally we're going to be getting Observers, but then he gets the Dark Templar up there as well. In other words, he smooths out his play. He wants these Dark Templars to have extended purpose throughout the game. Obviously, with Scan, this isn't going to be that effective. So, I kind of question just, haphazardly throwing a guy up there. Maybe he really wants to waste his opponent's Scan, but I'd kind of doubt it. Now, this is something I was saying is really interesting, is getting the Reaver after all this. Naturally, getting Reavers is good because, as you'll note with these minerals, just down here, just the stuff that's covered up by the GUI, you can plant Reavers here, and the Reaver shots will whip around and kill them off. And that's actually the same for all the expansions around this ring. So naturally, Reavers are good. The thing I'm questioning, though, is, was the choice to go Dark Templars first and then Reavers a good one? I'm not so sure, and I'm not that sold on it. Part of the reason why you would want to end up doing that is because you could screw up your opponent's tech pattern and thought process, because almost never does a Protoss player go Dark Templar and then suddenly go Reaver, especially that quickly after each other. So, for instance, Terrans will generally put all the stuff at the front of their base for defense, unless they think their opponent's going Reavers. And then they'll put 1 or 2 tanks at their front and leave all the rest in their main to defend against that drop. Obviously, since Light went Dark Templar, Let me try it again. Obviously, since Movie went Dark Templar, Light is not going to be bringing all his stuff back in his base to prepare for Reaver harass. And Light probably has turrets in places that are good for holding off Dark Templar, but not so good for holding off Reavers. So perhaps that's what Movie's trying to take advantage of. If you're trying to do this, make sure you know that it's not really good or really bad, just that you need to do a ton of damage with these Reavers to make all of this worthwhile. That's all. That is what defines if something is good or bad, especially in the harassment category, because all that money that was spent on Dark Templar is gone now because those 2 DTs are dead. But it did delay this expansion a little bit. It did have these turrets placed a little bit differently. I'm going to ignore this a little bit for now. I mean, it looks like he's going to pick off a few probes, and that's clearly good. And we'll come back to this in a little bit, because this is an element of Light's greater play. But look here at this Reaver harass. I'm not sold on this still. I mean, it's pretty clear that there's only one turret here, and generally if you're expecting Reaver harass, you're going to plant it a little bit farther out to prevent the Reaver from getting this close. And now, look, Light has to run all his SCVs away, and he's panic building turrets. Right now, we've already had a significant loss, probably $300 down the drain right now, because of all this, the fact that all those SCVs are not mining in the slightest. And now, see, we get to see some more abuse that these Reavers can put on. We get to see the hurt that Movie's laying down on Light. But, of course, Light repels it fairly easily. Now, let's take a brief moment to discuss Light's overall game plan. We have 2 factories here. Let me back up a little bit to when we got the chance to see them. Maybe we didn't get a chance to see them. Maybe we'll never know. Well, either way, I'll just describe it to you. We see 2 factories here for Light, one with add-on, one without, and we see a starport. In general, if I see 1 factory with add-on and 2 without, or 3 without, that would signify to me an early push. You make vultures out of all the factories, which are the units that allow you to be aggressive as Terran, and you make tanks for the muscle. But we only see 1 factory without add-on, and we see a starport being made. So naturally, he's going to be going for some sort of harassment with the drops, but in the context of a build that I think is more geared towards powering and more geared towards taking expansions. The fact that the map is so wide out, just getting a dropship, especially to take advantage of the fact that Dragoons can't really defend drop paths, and the fact that you can drop vultures behind minerals, I think is a totally wise choice, and definitely is exploiting the architecture of this map. I don't know if I would like it so much on other maps, but again, something I like a lot. In Movie's position, on the other hand, I'm not so sold on this. We only have 2 expansions here. We're equal with Terran. We have 4 gateways up, and we spent all this money doing harassment that may or may not have really had that incredible of an effect. Really, we need to start expanding a little bit more and taking advantage of the fact that Terran's really been pinned back for quite a long time. And again, unfortunately for Movie, Light just popped a Wraith out, and there's not much you can do about that. That's really one situation where I'm comfortable using the word counter. Normally I hate the word counter. But really, if you have the starport and there's a shuttle wandering around in your base, get the Wraith, man. It helps so much. It is the worst feeling in the universe to just, like, lose your shuttle to 1 Wraith and to not be able to do anything about it. Yeah, you can drop the Dragoon and have its stupid AI try to fire a little bit. But, even though Movie suffered this horrific tragedy and lost this shuttle, look at how nice this is. Because there's land here, and not like mountainous rubble or something like there'd be on Medusa, Movie can comfortably land and live here for a little bit. Set up a campfire and just have the Reaver curl up in a sleeping bag until the next shuttle ends up arriving. This woman was praying, and she is just embarrassed about it. Unfortunately, because of the architecture of this map, you can end up mining out these backsides. So, for instance, right down there, you do run the risk of just losing your Reaver and Dragoon for nothing. So, I mean, you shouldn't be overjoyed about losing the shuttle. It's actually pretty bad. So, again, that's why I'm kind of saying, I'm not so sure I like Movie's game plan. Already we're seeing how incredibly kick-ass it is to do this fast dropship and these 2 factory style, because look at how awesome this is. The fact that you've only mined away 1 right now means that you can have this very cute tactical force here do a ton of damage. Look, 1 Dragoon, 1's in red, and stuff. stopped mining. One thing I always spend a lot of time looking at is the food disparities. Protoss wants to be much higher in food than this right now, probably about around 75. I mean, you don't want to be this close to Terran. Look, 62 to 66. The movie's not even mining out of that one. Movie is doing a lot of smart things, though, like having this very narrow passageway of pylons at his front. That's something you should do on every single map you play on. Make sure you have plenty of pylons sealing off these areas. Look at that one little tiny hole for vultures to fit through. And vultures, even though they look skinny, are a pretty fat unit, so because they can't squeeze through these little tiny cracks because they're so fat, it's good to make little holes so the fat vultures can't get through. This is blowing my mind. So let me explain why I'm going and why I'm discussing about my mind being blown. Anytime I see something, I always try to think about what allowed you to lead up to that and what all the implications are for past that point. And I actually, probably the place I think about least is what's actually happening. So for instance, what we're actually seeing and what I'm freaking out about is the fact that a bunch of Dark Templar are loading up into a shuttle. I mean, the in the now analysis might go something along the lines of, well, gee, Light has a lot of scans set up, and he has turrets, and he has a Wraith, so it doesn't really seem like harass is going to do that much. So I'm trying to think right now, God, is Movie having that shuttle hang out to stop a push? Because I can conceive of him saying, yeah, I want to make sure I have a shuttle with Dark Templar instead of a shuttle with Zealots, so that way it forces my opponent to waste scan, which means it delays his push even more. That's kind of a really fragile technical defense that I'd love to see work out, but this is why I'm just kind of trying to think really hard about what's going to be done with those shuttles in the future. And then in terms of the what led up to that, we had Dark Templar into Reaver, and now back into Dark Templar, and I just don't know if too much money's been spent. So, I mean, what could be the case is that Movie's seeing a whole lot of stuff that I'm not, and I'm always willing to accept the fact that these players are, always thinking of stuff that I'm, not thinking of. But this is the sort of stuff that we're starting to see. Oh, hey, now I see Dark Templars can sneak up here. And now he has those Reavers up here. So, hey, now I'm starting to see this. It looks like Movie forced Light to have bad positioning with all these turrets. So that way the Reaver could come in and do some damage, and, if the Reaver gets killed, it's still okay, because we're going to use Dark Templar even more to abuse these weirdly placed turrets. And we see the shuttle retreating here. I bet it's retreating with the Reaver, just to sort of bolster the ground defenses for Movie. I'm still not sold on this harassment by Movie. I mean, really, Movie's probably lost more than he's gained. And at this point, it's important to think about your advantages as Protoss. You have the freedom to be a lot more aggressive when you have fewer bases, because it's so much easier to defend your bases. And hey, look at that. He killed off that one key tank, so now he can have some Reavers doing some shots up here. This is also beautiful, beautiful tactical work by Light. Just having a handful of units doing dropship action around the corners of the map was really, really effective. Vultures need to start shooting a touch more instead of showing how much they can run around. I think we could have killed maybe 2 or 3 extra probes here. Only now do we see Movie expanding here. And you know what? Honestly, if this were something like Python, I would be really like, oh god, Movie, gross, yuck. Oh, you're playing so bad. But the fact that you have this outside expansion that's so easy to defend makes it a little bit more okay. And look at this is so sexy. Movie's doing what Terran players would want to do, these little sexy tactical forces. This is kind of funny, he's shooting up there, revealing himself. Or wait, no, maybe you can't see that. Looks like he did see it. But I do like this sort of stuff. This takes advantage of the get it. Oh no, oh not so good. Oh, whoops. Go Reaver. I'm allowed to get excited even though this is a hard-hitting analysis. Good defense by Terran. Notice this placement. A lot of Terran players screw this up, especially on BGH. They put tanks like as far forward as it'll go. You only need to put it here to be right in range of firing Dragoons. Or firing Reavers in that case. So I love that placement. Love, 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 love. All this aggression is really, in part, the map architecture, but also part of the fact that Movie has not expanded very much and has quite a lot of ground units, so he gets to do stuff like this. I mean, this is great, and I'm still thinking back to that Dark Templar drop that I paused and thought so much about. I still don't know if I like it that much. Still do not know. Because, I mean, this is great, but this could have come maybe sooner. But, you know, maybe Movie's better than I am. Not sure about it, but maybe. I have an open mind, you know. Something to note, if you're low on expansions and you're having trouble catching up, I would definitely recommend getting a shuttle with High Templar. Because in effect what you're doing is getting gas at an expansion a little bit earlier than you normally would. Because, I mean, for instance, if we're playing on Heartbreak Ridge and we can't get a fourth... well, let me rephrase that. If we're playing on Heartbreak Ridge and we can get a fourth, we don't end up getting gas at our third base. But if we're playing on Heartbreak Ridge and we can't get a fourth, sometimes totally easy and convenient to whip out a geyser and just straight up get High Templar. It allows us to have a little bit more efficiency. See, look, High Templar. A little bit more efficiency with our units, with our economy. Really good job by Light. This is the stuff you want to be doing a lot. If you take a few vultures, and you can almost always wander vultures around the map, they serve two purposes with dropships. First of all, notice mines being planted here. This defends the path of this dropship. So now these Dragoons are very, very scared to head up north. And also, you can do this sort of stuff, where you drop the units in the dropship, and then you pick up the vultures and swing them over. I mean, that's exactly what we saw here earlier in the game. This is a really, really great tactic. I actually really loved watching it on Jim Raynor's Memory, if anyone remembers that beautiful map. I mean, on that map, I think the Zerg vs. Protoss statistics were like 19-3. It was so cool. That's what I call a balanced map, is Zerg. Oh, yeah. And Terran vs. Protoss, though, had really interesting matches on it, just because all the high ground, low ground action. And this sort of stuff was very, very, very popular there. So Light doing his usual thing, getting lots of factories. I want to go back to his base and see if he does the style that I like seeing him do, which is a lot of factories for a lot of cool mid-game timing pushes, and less emphasis on this flash style of getting a lot of upgrades early and slowly adding on more. Still note these food disparities. Look at how close these foods are. Generally, Protoss would be around 150, sometimes even 160. Excuse me. But the fact that we saw that Movie was having a little bit of problems with his early harassment, didn't go very well. These are much closer than we'd normally expect them to be. Whoops. Whoopsie daisies. We don't want to do that. This is also very good by Protoss to just be clearing out a lot with his mines and this sort of thing. It helps a lot with movement paths, and that helps a lot with that food disparity to lose all those vultures. Look, he's like it looked like he was just chewing air in disappointment. Let's just take another look at that. That was like totally cool. Look at him. Here he comes. He's like a Pez dispenser, man. Look at this. Poor guy. So right now it does seem like he's doing this mass powering sort of thing, doing a lot of harassment. I really want to see if that's a command center. This is always a strong style to play, especially if you have a lot of expansions nearby. You spend a lot of money making vultures and doing lots of harassment with them. Whoops, I guess it was a command center. Let's pause it for a minute. You end up getting like maybe 5 factories, 3 without add-on, 2 with, and you use the vultures to do a lot of harassment, whether it be direct walking, which is what we just saw on the mini-map. We just saw all those vultures die, or with the dropship harass. Both of those are great. And then you start stockpiling tanks in the meantime. So your food ends up slowly being skewed towards a tank composition as opposed to a vulture composition. And in the end, what happens is, because the Protoss has been so crippled by your vulture harassment, that when you finally do move out, you have all these tanks that have really good upgrades. And it does look like Light was in fact not going for the style of play I like to see him do, which is the out-of-control nutty aggressive, but he was in fact going for a little bit more of the flash style. See, we have the upgrades right there. I'm not sure if I like the choice to expand back here or over the front there, but I think both would be a little bit difficult in this situation. This strikes me as very ballsy to be hitting right here, but one of the biggest motivations for hitting right here in this wedge is the fact that obviously you'll note that there's this triangle here that space spreads out as we go here. So Protoss gets a good flanking position coming down from these angles. And also because Terran's trying to come out and then open into this larger area, units are clustered, and we have High Templar. High Templar, I think, are one of the biggest motivating factors for attacking right here. Because look how sick these storms can be. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful storms. And it's partly the fact that movie had really good storm placement, but largely a fact that all these units were so clustered. Let's actually take another look at that, because I think that's awesome. So, I mean, trying to expand here. I mean, we obviously don't want this to happen, but, I mean, this is good placement. Maybe have one tank up there. These 3 tanks, there should be more tanks here just because units come from the right, but this tank has just a little bit of extra range and can cover the command center up there. But look at this awesome attack. This is just absolutely kick-ass. So there's so many units, so he's starting to exit out. Clearly looks like he wants to take this mineral natural, so we have to back up. Nothing too big. Most Terrans would most Protosses would back out hard here. They would freak out. But look at this. So coming in, and then look at how the tanks siege. Look, tanks sieging right up here. Tanks sieging in packs right down there. That is awesome. That is so cool. And what's even cooler is the fact that it's great and easy to kill off these units at the bottom of the ramp. So now we can sneak back here with our Dragoons. This, in my eyes, is the move that is like, wow, you really equalize that hard and fast, movie. That was a great, great play. I honestly think that if movie hadn't pulled a move that nice, that he may have been in a much more difficult position. Or I should say a difficulter position, because that's cooler and funner to say. It's always good to make up a word or two in each cast, just to let people know that I talk my own way. And also, we have a lot of cannons being made at each position, and in line with the production of the Forge. We have upgrades coming out there as well. So again, that's another example of making sure you have a long-term plan for a short-term solution. Haha, look, he made cannons, but he's also getting those plus upgrades. See, look, there's a +1. Super good, super duper duper good. Also, if you already have Templar tech and you've taken an expansion, traditionally in Protoss vs. Terran we take a lot of expansions, but especially if you've been cramped on expos the way movie has, take your gas immediately here and continue to produce Templar. That's going to be super duper duper effective. It's a good way to make sure your army's still, you're making as many units for the number of resources that you have. You stay really economically efficient. I'm just going to briefly say that in StarCraft, economic efficiency, in a lot of cases, is not the #1 goal. I mean, you don't want to have the most efficient combination of units. You just want to, kill your opponent. In a sense, Protoss is expanding all over the place and not getting geysers at their expansions is not efficient, but it still ends up working, and you end up just battering your opponent down by having so many more units. And here's an example of the Protoss being economically efficient by getting gas at all his expansions and ending up using a lot of Templar. And, I mean, what I just said doesn't have the biggest impact on your decision-making, but it's still an interesting thing to think about, especially because I'm in a game design program, and I like to be all hoity-toity and high-level and pompous with my thoughts about video games, so I just wanted to share a little bit of that. And this is cool. So this is one part about the map that I think I said in the first recording of this, before it crashed twice, is that I like the fact that as Terran is expanding out more and more, it gets harder and harder to defend these expansions. You only get about one totally free expansion. And we just missed a mine popping up and killing Dragoons, which is probably my favorite thing in the StarCraft universe, is mines killing Dragoons. 2 Valiant SCVs trying to bring the noise a little bit, getting killed, no big deal. Happens from time to time. Archons are pretty underrated in terms of harassment because, again, players generally don't focus on economically efficient styles of play. They focus on mass expanding styles of play and getting arbiters. But Archons are serious killers, man, because when you drop a Reaver at an expansion, you're going to have trouble with tanks, especially even if they have just like 2-3 tanks. But if you drop Archons, they can seriously put hurt on. I mean, you can kill the tanks really quickly and kill the Archons really quickly as well. You just need to obviously avoid EMP. EMP really kills you. So, right after that attack, I would put Movie at the advantage. Because he has a little bit more freedom to move around the middle. I mean, that move coming in right here gave him so much map control that Light is struggling to take 2 expansions that touch his base. That's how significant the advantage he gained was. And all of it was the fact that he had those High Templar, and it was a really, really nice opportunity to just corner the Terran's units and force them to be in nice packed clumps so that the storms could maximize their damage. If he didn't have those storms, maybe if he was expanding a lot, I would suggest pulling back. I think pulling back would be a much better choice there. If he had just Dragoons and Zealots and hadn't even gotten towards Arbiter Tech yet, I think it would have been even worse. So here we see a little bit of carrier action. I would definitely say that a huge reason we're getting carriers here is because we have Storm. I probably shouldn't say we, considering neither you nor I is actually playing this game. A guy named Movie, who's probably better than both of us is. But still, it's kind of fun to say things that way, especially because I'm a math major and you always begin sentences with we in math. But Movie has High Templar, and Dragoon High Templar Carrier is one of the most impossible to stop unit combinations in all of StarCraft. This probably isn't going to win. I don't think Movie was intending on winning with this play. I think it's designed primarily to keep the tank positioning farther back, to keep tanks more down here in this area as opposed to all the way up here at this expansion, because notice that by killing these units, this expansion at the right is also feeling much more scared. And also, it allows us to free up some food for our carriers and take a little bit of advantage of that. So right now, I would imagine Movie would start making a lot more Dragoons, Templar, and Carriers at this point, ease up on Zealots slightly, not too much, because Zealots are, still an awesome unit. And this is going to really screw up Light's unit composition, because already Light is a little bit forced back. He's really itching to get more tanks out, more Vultures for mines. He's not in any mood to start producing a huge number of Goliaths in order to hold off carriers. It's actually really cool to see the fact that... Oh yeah, by the way, there's some more Archons being awesome. If we just imagine this line across the map, from this expansion over to this expansion, no Terran units have crossed this line that weren't in a dropship. Yeah, Vultures went up here and tried to do something and failed, but really there was some dropship harass up on this top side, there was some dropship harass on this bottom side. But Movie, because he's been so aggressive with his harassment, he's kept Terran in, and then especially after that one attack with all the storms, he's been allowed to keep Terran in even more. And it's increasingly hard for Terran to actually put any pressure back on Movie, because of the fact that these are quite far distances here. This is cool, cannon rushing. Let's see, 22 minutes and 40 seconds into the game. Never above it in high-level professional matches, and in 2v2v, 2v2s on BGH. A lot of times they don't notice there. That's always fun. So Movie being really good about continuing to get gas at his expansions. These two expansions here, though, don't have gas, so that's why we see this excess of money. And I wouldn't be surprised either if Movie tried to do some more aggressive plays with Zealots. Let me rephrase that. Try to do more aggressive plays where he ends up losing a lot of Zealots, because really, we don't want to have too much of our food be Zealot heavy when we're going for that Dragoon, High Templar, Carrier army. This is all expanding next to where your opponent's expanding. Always fun. But this harassment, look at this. You don't need Arbiters at all to exploit this. Look at how strong this is without Arbiters. On Outsider, you could probably do the same thing as well. A lot of players seem to forget about shuttles after a certain point. The shuttles are only a transport for Reavers or Dark Templar, and once the Reavers and Dark Templar die, you just stop seeing them. But I really like the fact that Movie is continuing to do these sorts of drops here, because clearly it's absolutely demolishing Light. I mean, Light still is having a lot of trouble crossing this line and sending his dropships into the middle of the map. Now, if I were Light, some of the stuff I would want to be doing right now is deciding where I want to push. So, for instance, let's say Light's like, wow, you know what, this is pretty vulnerable, because if I can just move into this area, I stop any troops from coming over this way. In addition to that, I would maybe start moving here to this fat double bridge right here on the map. Actually, I'm going to be loading up the map from Team Liquid really quickly while I say this. But I would want to start mining in locations where I'm worried about defending. So I almost have El Nino loaded up. I don't have El Nino loaded up because unfortunately on the Team Liquid Pro Gamer database, the N actually has like an Enya. I don't know what it's called, but it's what makes you go Nyo, like El Nino, like that letter or whatever that is. Maybe someone who speaks Spanish can tell me. But that letter is there, and it makes it really hard to do a search on the map. But fortunately, I have succeeded. I have overcome the immense difficulty of having a convenient database that doesn't have one letter in it. Notice how Light is positioned all up here, and let's say he wants to move up here, because this area, if it's held, these two expansions are just dead. I would start moving over here and trying to plant as many mines here as I could, maybe even working vultures up here and planting mines. Because if we can cut off as many reinforcements there as possible, it's going to make this push much, much stronger. That's actually a lot of the reason why Movie's units are up here, because he doesn't want to end up in a situation where they're down here and get cut off from mines. This is cool. Movie gets to move out with carriers now because this expansion is so far over. Normally you hide carriers until you have a whole bunch of them. Also notice that this food number... Hey everyone, we should have Procaster up and running again. This is part 2 of Day 9 Daily number 13. I think that my Firefox is screwed up. I think that the most recent version of Firefox has some sort of memory leak on it, because it only seemed to start lagging once I did this thing where I opened up a new window and everything. So that's definitely something to keep in mind about whenever I'm doing future casts, is to make sure I take care of that a little bit earlier on. I rewound way far back. Let's go back to this really kick-ass attack. So we have some carriers doing some stuff over here. So we see the push beginning. I would like to see some vultures just narrowly squeeze up there, plant some mines. But either way, it's not going to end up taking huge effect because of this awesome push by Movie. And this is a really ugly position to be caught in, where you can't really find a good situation to siege your tanks. Because just having a lot of unsieged tanks firing is not good. I've actually seen a lot of Terran players do that, where they end up having a huge amount of tanks unsieged because they think, well, I got this, and then more Protoss units come in, and it's like, oh god, I do not have this at all. Terran has still a lot of money, starting to spend it a little bit more, but so I had a pretty extensive discussion about letting your money get high. I always say spend your money, yeah, make sure your money's low. However, there's obviously situations where you don't end up spending all your money. For instance, in Terran vs. Terran, you definitely have your money stockpiling. The problem I have right here is that you can spend money on vultures, and they're very effective. So question is, when did this money start to climb? And was that okay to let that money climb? Because you can do a lot of vulture harass and spend your money on that, and even if the vultures do die, you're still doing some limited damage, planting mines around the map, and you end up, in the exact same situation you do now, except you have 0 minerals. But you maybe have an advantage here. And see, now we're starting to see why I talked so much about laying mines there, is because look at how vulnerable these tanks are. That's going to be not so good. And just to say, right now, unfortunately, I won't be able to have a Q&A because the matches are starting. But unfortunately, just have to end it there. Next time, though, I will make sure that all these memory leak issues aren't going to happen and clog up my stream and prevent my viewers from being very, very happy. Because that's all that's important to a wee nerd like me. Still a pretty intimidating push. More harassment. This is always incredibly important to do. If you're in a situation where you're feeling really pressured, those are the most important situations to do a lot of harassment. So I'm digging this. I don't know how threatened movie really feels, though. Well, that's obviously not. That's not the best. But getting a bazillion SCV kills is the best. But see, look at this. Here, now we're starting to see the maneuverability of carriers. These sets of expansions up here, I would load up El Nino to show you, but it would, of course, cause my computer to reformat, so I'm not going to do that. If this terrain up here, again, if Terran moves here, it's really easy to kill both of these expansions, and that's what's great about the carriers, is we can just wander right on over, take advantage of that high ground ramp, and there's almost nothing that Terran can do. More counterattacking going on by movie. Notice how close this is still. We have 150 food to 150 food about. The carriers are going to cause quite a huge problem for Terran, though, because obviously he's going to end up running out of money here. We have no mining down here. And we need to get a whole ton of Goliaths. Yeah, that is a problem, isn't it? What was I going to say? I had a point. Oh, here it comes. Here comes the point. This is really, really close, I would say, largely because movie spent so much on failed harassment early. I mean, if that had not happened, I imagine Light would be in a much, much better position. And even here, with this push here, I still like more mines being laid up here a little bit before the push happens. I also am not sure I like the decision to move over here. Well, okay, so here's what I think about this push. This defends this bottom expansion. That is the best reason that I can think of. Is if Terran pushes up here and moves around here, he can kill off the production centers for Protoss and be pretty much guaranteed this bottom expansion. But still, look at how awkward this composition is for Terran. Look at all these Goliaths and how much trouble they're having against the Zealots. And it's all because Light needs to make more to hold off these carriers. This really is the key thing to think about with carriers. Goliaths are, amazing against carriers. They are really, really good against carriers. But Goliaths suck against Dragoons and Storm. The reason carriers are so strong is not because you can just kill your opponent with carriers. Unless you're Harangi, and then of course that's his favorite thing to do. The main point is to screw up the Terran's unit composition, to have him make way more Goliaths than he wants to. And this is what I call desperation mode for Terran, where you start splitting up your units and moving all around the map to kill off these expansions in this desperate counterattack. Light does this a lot, and this is one position where I would not say he's going to come out on top. Only if he starts having a lot of units move up north here. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, that's just so bad. Oh, that's why I got glasses, so I can do that sort of thing. That is just the worst. Don't leave your carriers. Don't do that. I mean, they're almost like mutalisks. If they're not on the move when they're nearby your opponent's base, you should be freaking out. You should be like, oh, what are my carriers doing? And just like making sure that they're doing exactly what you want. And see, look at this. Look at all these mines going down here. That's awesome. Watch. I'm sure a push is going to happen here in a little bit. Probably because I can see how much longer the YouTube video is. Uh-oh, more carriers are vulnerable. So here is part of the fragility of carriers. We're seeing right now all the carriers suddenly are gone. And it really looks like Light's in a much better situation than he was before. Fortunately, Light has no money coming in, so movie is almost certainly won at this point, but really, really nice to think about how strong all this stuff is despite all these carrier losses. And you know what? Screw it. I will take like 1 or 2 questions at the end of this, but not many. Because again, this thing's been delayed so many times, and I'd hate to keep people from watching the matches. At this point, there's very little that Terran can do. This attack probably not going to work in terms of killing the opponent, but is almost certainly going to kill a bunch of Goliaths and prevent Terran from moving out more. And that's what's so key about having these Dragoon carrier armies, is to get yourself in situations where you can kill a lot of Goliaths, because Terran feels so pressured to defend this. This is a good place to sort of force the issue. Dragoon High Templar carrier. Zelidito, a Spanish player who all of you should be very familiar with, loved going carrier Dragoon High Templar. He'd almost rush for it in his games. And I was always blown away watching his replays to see how much Zelidito could kill. That's so cool, that skewed mineral distribution, how it slowly runs out like that. Still not sure if I know a race that would favor, or if it even does favor a race. But notice how there's fewer zealots as time goes on. Really good composition to have. And at this point, I mean, we're basically dead. So let me just do a recap of what I thought happened in the game. Like a very, very fast recap. I mean, look, by the way, look at this Zealot Dragoon just tear through this. I mean, there is just not that many ground units for Terran, but they're just so weak because it's just Goliaths. More Zealots coming in. Anytime you're in a big attack, start making a lot of Zealots back in your main, because your Zealots are what's going to die first, and what will allow you to continue pushing forward. Yes, poor Light. If I could just sum up what happened in this game, Movie did some alternating harass between Dark Templar and Reaver, which only on this map did it end up being okay, because his Reaver could kind of hang around for a little bit more after the shuttle had died. But, that harass I would call questionable at best. I'm not so sure I like how that harass went. I would much prefer to see something like just straight Dark Templar harass with a shuttle and then expanding a little bit more and having some transition based upon that. And then after this, Movie did a very smart thing, and he ended up getting High Templar and expanding a little bit less, staying a little bit tighter, got a lot of units, and then he got that great flank where right when Light came out of his base, Movie dropped and stormed, and it sort of evened out things again, and I like that quite a bit. So yeah, that was probably the moment where things evened out a little bit, and at that point, the fact that Movie was doing so much harassment around the edges of the map were really, really helpful, and the fact that he got that Carrier Dragoon High Templar Zealot combination made it really impossible for Light to push at any point in the game. Light had a really, really hard time doing much past that first push. There was one push where there's a little bit of danger, but then the carriers came in and demolished it. So, Savior asks a question. What are some of the other unbeatable unit combinations in StarCraft besides what you mentioned to us earlier? Carriers, High Templar, and Dragoons. I don't want it to be thought of as an unbeatable unit combination. You should never think of StarCraft in terms of unbeatable unit combinations. Because, of course, a lot of the issue with these combinations is getting there in the first place. But that's a really strong one. None others really stick out to me. Except maybe, like, Tank Battle Cruiser. That one seems pretty cool. Defiler Anything's awesome. But think of it more in terms of the strategy leading up to it. So, for instance, in terms of the unbeatable Carrier Dragoon High Templar, I would think of that more as when Terran's in a fix and really needs to spend a lot of money on ground units to counter your ground army, and you just throw 2 or so carriers in your base. 2 or so carriers are really going to screw up your opponent's unit combination and allow that strong unit combination to just go in. Here's a great question from Andrew. I'll answer this in one more. It says, "Hey, Day9, I've reached C+ with my Protoss vs. Terran, and I've never used High Templars. What can you recommend I start doing to help integrate High Templars into my play?" two situations. One is if you get screwed and you end up losing an expansion you didn't want to. So for instance, let's go to Heartbreak Ridge because that's just a very easy one. If you have your 3 bases, your main, your natural, and then that nearby gas expansion, and you try to take a 4th but you lose it, add on a gas at your 3rd and start going High Templar, and it's a really convenient, easy way to make sure you still stay in the game. The second way I would use High Templar is if you are in a situation like Flash versus Best that we saw last night, that we'll actually be doing tomorrow. Best ended up getting a bunch of High Templar when he saw that his opponent was going for a really long-term, very powery kind of play, a lot of upgrades coming from Flash, and you need to make sure that you have a very bolstered army and that you can hold off a Terran who is as good as Flash. So if you just get the High Templar really early, get Storm, load him into the shuttle, and then go back to adding a bazillion gateways and expanding, you'll be in really, really good shape for the push. So let me make sure I answer the best question possible. You know what? Clockwise, you have posted your question 1,000 times. You are just spamming, and because it's a question and not something like penis, 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 I will not ban you and I will answer your question. So it says, so, in this situation, Clockwise asks, that Light decided to go tank and vulture harass. Did he just waste too much vultures? Or was the map not open enough to move around? I think that his vulture harass was effective enough. I liked the way it ended up working out. That is a good question. So, I mean, to answer your question directly, I think there were a few situations where Light maybe could have done his harass a little bit better. So the one I'm thinking of in particular was the drop at the back of Movie's main, where we saw Light drop 2 tanks and then 4 vultures dropped up there. That could have gone a little bit better. That may have been controlled a little bit better. I think the overarching question you're asking is, why is it that Flash lost, even though I talked so much about why I liked his harass? Should he have done it more? I think that some of the control could have been done better, but I think the biggest thing was that Light didn't do the best job of defending his expansions while he was doing the harass. Movie really exploited the lack of expansion defense a ton, and that can happen a lot when you're being very harass aggressive the way that Light was. You focus so much energy on doing the harassment and sort of assuming your opponent's going to be caught up in that, that you don't end up really defending your expansions enough. So I would point to that as the biggest hole in that whole harassment play, is that too much money was devoted to harassment and not enough was devoted to defense. And that is going to wrap this up. I'm going to try to maybe group this into one video, but might not end up being the case in the on-demand. And that is going to be about it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Tune in tomorrow for another Terran vs. Protoss. We have Best vs. Light. God, I'm the worst. How can I not say anything right? We're going to be tuning in for Best vs. Flash. And that should be a totally kick-ass match. Thanks so much, everyone. Cheers. And go watch the matches, because that's what I'm going to do. Peace.